Welcome, everybody, to Politics for Dummies. I'm Casey. I'm going to be your host. Obviously, no one else is here. It's just me talking to a camera in a room by myself. Not weird at all. Okay, tonight we're going to start off the series with a totally not boring or divisive political topic, Trump. And more specifically, the impeachment of President Trump. Now, before you click off, just understand two things, please. I'm not a Republican Trump, fluffer. That's going to dismiss all of this as nothing. And I'm not a Democrat hater who's going to say that I know things that I don't know. I'm not going to try and frame things in a light that they are not in, and I'm not going to try and say that they are what they aren't. We're just going to say things for what they are in hopefully a kind of funny manner. Let me be clear. I do have my own beliefs. I do hate most politicians, as most people do. I do hate most of modern politics and their setting today. But at my core, I am a political science student who studies and loves politics for what they are. I'm at least somewhat funny. I mean, at least my mom says so, begrudgingly. I mean, like if I've had a bad day or something and I say a joke, she laughs a little bit and says, hey, that was funny. I try and ignore everyone else in the room who just kind of, sits there like this. And then my dad, especially, who gives me that dead-eyed stare every time I try and make a joke. And yeah, let me address, I'm not wearing a suit. I don't usually. But without further ado, let's get right into it, right? I'm going to give simple background on the impeachment first and what impeachment is. So impeachment is the formal investigation by the federal government into a sitting United States president. It's not removal unless the president is found guilty of whatever articles of impeachment the Senate puts forward and whatever they vote on to find him guilty of. If they find him guilty, then he will be removed if that is so fit. All of this impeachment, Trump's impeachment that is, stems from a call between President Trump and the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. In this call, back in the middle of 2019, President Trump asked for a favor, and that favor was for Vladimir Zelensky to get his Justice Department to investigate Hunter Biden and his company for political corruption, just to make sure that there wasn't anything going on there. In return for the military aid that we already had promised them. We promised them money and military aid so they can fight off, terrorists and whatnot. Long story short, after all of this came out, Trump described it as a perfect call, which in my opinion is just like a weird way to describe a call. I mean, there's so many other adjectives you could use there. You could say it was a good call. It was a great call. The call went well. Like, I've never had a call and gotten off the phone and been like, that's perfect. Now, I may be splitting hairs here. Yes, obviously. But I'm going to pass that off as very dry humor because, I'm not a very funny guy. Now, again, Trump in specific has said that this was a quid pro but no quo, or a quid quo but no pro, and Republicans have backed that. Now, if you're lost in what that means, don't feel bad. We all are. You can't have a quid quo with no pro. It's all the same thing. Republicans have generally backed that, and Democrats have, generally said, that's terrible, this is awful, this is the worst thing in history, which I think that might be blowing things a little out of proportion on both sides. But the House of Representatives did move forward, and they did vote to impeach Trump officially on 2 articles of impeachment, which were abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Now that that background's out of the way, let's get into the new juicy gossip that everyone's talking about on the schoolyard. Trump's lawyer, a guy who permanently looks surprised, and he kind of resembles a screen painting. Rudy Giuliani. He had 2 people who worked with him and interned Trump, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. Lev Parnas has described himself as a James Bond-like vigilante who's, working for Trump as whatever you want to call that, even though he looks more like a drunk Mr. Bean that just got off of a carousel and fell down. Well, both of these guys worked for Giuliani, and Lev Parnas ended up getting arrested for reasons that don't matter and nobody really cares about. He's working with the federal government now, is the point of this. He's working with the federal government now in Trump's impeachment case. So in new information that was obtained by his phone, or through his phone, There's WhatsApp messages between him and a longtime Trump supporter and congressional candidate now who started working for Giuliani and in turn Trump. His name's Robert Hyde. We don't know how he got to working with him. Actually, nobody really does. But I choose to believe, personally, that Hyde was sitting at one of Trump's bars and Giuliani was there too, and they just locked eyes and knew it was destined to be. Now, that may not be true, but I think it sounds nice. So these messages, they kind of get dark. They're a little bit ominous, right? They talk about Marie Yovanovitch, who was the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And Trump didn't like her, and from reports I'm reading, she didn't really like Trump. So they didn't see eye to eye regardless. So she was probably going to get the sack anyway. I'm going to read these messages now. I have them printed out there. So this is Robert Hyde messaging Lev Parnas. And Robert Hyde says, she's next to the embassy talking to Marie Yovanovitch, obviously, not in the embassy. And he says that she has private security that's been there since Thursday. And Lev Parnas responds, that's interesting. Now, it is very interesting because that implies that he's surveilling her, which is highly illegal. And then he goes on to say, they know she's a political puppet. They will let me know when she's on the move. And they'll let me know when she's on the move. He says it twice. And then Lev Parnas responds, perfect, right? And this shows that they have her under illegal surveillance at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. And I mean, that's very damning evidence just to come out and say on WhatsApp messages of all places. Like, how do you can't get caught on WhatsApp. That's not the smoking gun you want to be caught with. WhatsApp, good sponsorship for them, though. So there's more messages, and they say on March 25th of last year, this is when this all took place, 25th and 26th, Robert Hyde messages Lev Parnas and says, they are moving her tomorrow. The guys over here asked me what I would like to do and what is in it for them. And then he says that she's talked to 3 people, her phone is off and her computer is off. Now, right then and there, we're getting a little dark, you know? Why are they surveilling her, and what are they asking these people to do, right? And then he goes on to say they're willing to help if you would like a price. And then he says, guess you can do anything in Ukraine with money. Lev Parnas responded, LOL to that. But that's pretty damning right there. I mean, not that we have to assume the worst, but we can't assume anything's good when he says you can do anything with money. If you do something simple with money, you don't look at somebody and say, dang, you could do anything with money. No, it's when something is not supposed to be done. You understand? And then he updates him and says, update, she will not be moved. The security forces are upped and yada, 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 all that. And then he goes, if you want her out, they need to make contact with her security forces. Now, that is pretty much a smoking gun right there. He says, if you want her out, they will need to make contact with security forces. I mean, it's hard not to look at that as an ominous message, right? He's saying that they're going to take her out in one way or another, whatever that means. We don't know if that's the worst. We don't know if that's the best. But either way, you can't really get a good result from that. And this has all been talked back. I don't know if either of them has spoken on it. I know Lev Parnas said that he was working with the federal government, and Robert Hyde said it's copy and paste bullshit. You know, the usual. I mean, someone copy and pasted using his username and hacking into his thing from almost a year ago and put these messages out, which doesn't sound logical, especially if Lev Parnas was the one whose phone they got it from. But the reason that Trump didn't like Marie Yovanovitch was because, you know, she didn't agree with the things he was doing and he didn't agree with the things that she was doing. Either way you spin it, they didn't like each other, or at least it seems that way. So the proper way to get her out of the job, right, was to remove her. He is the sitting United States president. He can choose the U.S. ambassadors. But it seems like he used Giuliani to send Lev Parnas to deal with it. And he dealt with it by having her illegally surveilled and, I mean, seemingly threatened. We don't know. We can't assume the worst, obviously. I keep saying that, but we can't. She was illegally surveilled and maybe threatened. Maybe. We'll go with the maybe. Now, you got to ask yourself, how does this look for Trump's impeachment? I'm not saying he was involved with it. I'm not saying he's guilty of it. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying, how does it look on surface level? On surface level, it looks pretty damn bad. Now, I don't know if they'll call both of these people to testify in the Senate, trial, but if they don't, that just looks bad on the surface. So as the case moves towards the Senate, it doesn't look so good. It doesn't look like Trump's defenses are going to be working with, he didn't know anything unless they call them forward. So, I mean, this is just another update on, a little monkey wrench that was thrown in the whole mix. It was a pretty crazy read, and it was a pretty crazy thing that came out when Lev Parnas released all these documents to, the United States government. But that's all I have for tonight, just that little update. Thank you all for watching, especially you, Mom. And good night, everybody. And remember, this was Politics for Dummies.